said that about black women?
He's saying, and I'll just tell you what he said. He's saying that Charlie Kirk was talking specifically about certain black women, like Jackson and former First Lady Michelle Obama and others. He wasn't talking about black women in general, just the ones.
But you see, I think that's so missing the point, because there's some folks out there trying to sanitize everything that Charlie Kirk said that might be offensive to others. The governor of Utah called some of the statements by Charlie Kirk inflammatory, and he's taking a lot of flack from his own party for doing that. And the point is, when I say people are missing the point is, look, let's acknowledge that Charlie Kirk wasn't out there spreading pixie dust and talking about unicorns, and that some of the things he said, to quote the governor of Utah, were inflammatory and worse. But the point is, he has the...
Charlie Kirk was assassinated. His death was wrong. Ana Navarro said that clearly. She also refused to pretend his documented statements about black women's brain processing power were acceptable. The conservative panelists called that disrespectful. She called it honest. There is a difference between celebrating a death and refusing to lie about the person who died.
Is the Vice President, Joe, going on a podcast that he recorded from the White House and using that moment after a tragedy like this to say that this is about punishing them being the left, them being his political opponents. That actually, I think, is surprising to a lot of Americans, because that's not typically what you would expect to hear from the White House after.
Well, let's talk about some polling that he used to justify those comments before he made them on TV. YouGov came out with a poll 3 days ago talking about how each side feels about violence and support of political deaths. Liberals, 16%, believe it's okay to feel joy when your political opponent is killed. Liberals, very liberals, 24%. Conservatives, 4%. Very conservatives, 3%. Justifying violence. Very liberal people have 25% answered yes, it's okay, you justified that you should do violence against your political opponents. Liberals, 17%, conservatives, 8%, and very conservatives, 3%. That means it is 6 to 1 times more likely in respondents to this poll on the left. Now, I'm not saying there's exclusivity on the left. I'm not saying that. But there is certainly a problem where 6 times the amount of Republicans believe that it's okay to feel joy when your political opponent is killed, murdered, whatever, attacked, and that 6 to 1 believe that they are okay in justifying violence against political opponents. That's a problem. That's a
justice that says that most of the political crimes that have been committed in recent years has been by the right wing. But I think that's irrelevant.
It's not
and
accurate.
I think no, I do because I think it's I don't want to spend the time saying, it's that side and it's this side, because I think right now, for me, it's an American problem. And the fact that the initial reaction of so many people is to try to prove that this killer was a left-winger, or some people looking to prove him to be a right-winger. He was obviously a severely disturbed nutcase with an agenda. We don't know what the motive is yet. But, what I don't think we should allow as a result of this is the government, the Trump administration, weaponizing Charlie Kirk's horrible assassination and using it as a cudgel and as a weapon of fear to silence those who call out abuses by this administration. And when I see Donald Trump's reaction to being asked today if he should have lowered the flags for the Minnesota legislators, and his answer was, who? What? I'm not familiar with it.
You're seeking the death penalty in those cases.
But
the Trump DOJ is seeking the death penalty, just so we're aware.
Think for 1 minute how you would feel if you were one of the 2 children left orphaned because your mother, Melissa Hortman, and your father, Mark Hortman, because they've got names. They're not just state legislators. They've got names. They've got children. And their dog was killed.
I mean, I'm
and you
not
hear
part
the president of the United States say...
who justifies that.
No,
who are these people? Just to correct the record, there were 20 incidents, according to the knower of all things Wikipedia, 20 incidents of civil unrest in this country since 2020. 6th, One of them was an Orthodox Jewish riot here in New York City. Frankly, I don't know how to handicap that one. The other 18, you can draw clear lines to leftist organizations under the guise of social justice warriors, et cetera. I just think...
Let's start with the two truths Dr. Cornel West articulated, because they kept getting collapsed into a single false choice. Truth one, the assassination of Charlie Kirk was wrong. Political murder is never justified. His family deserves full compassion. Truth two, Kirk's documented statements about black women's cognitive capacity were offensive, harmful, and deserve honest condemnation, before his death and after it. Both truths coexist. They are not in conflict. The insistence that criticizing his ideology after his death constitutes celebrating his murder is not a moral argument. It is a silencing tactic dressed as one. Navarro made the distinction clearly. She condemned Kirk's death. She also refused to allow it to function as retroactive absolution for statements still on the record that still affected real people. Vance claimed progressive media lied about what Kirk said to justify violence.
Looking at is a deeper issue in this sense. It's a matter of what kind of quality leadership emerges and quality voices emerges in a moment of such polarization. 62 years ago, 4 precious little black girls were blown up in 16th Street Church in Birmingham, right? 14 years old, 3 of them. One was 11 years old. When Martin King gave the eulogy, what did he say? He didn't say anything that either one of the Republicans and the Democrats saying right now. He says, we've got a crisis of character. We've got a crisis of quality of leadership, and I'm speaking to the possibilities of love and justice as human beings. It's not going to be a question of one team and another team. He could have stood up there and said, we need to create a black version of the Ku Klux Klan, because they didn't find who did it for decades. Is that right? As a lawyer, they didn't find who did it, right? He could have said, we need to terrorize back. We've got to engage in hatred back. He said, no, we are loving ourselves. We are loving others. We're pursuing justice. And we recognize we're in a battle, but it can't be a battle that slides down a slippery slope to chaos. Where are the voices?
Yeah, I mean,
these days?
No, but I will tell you, there are voices because the 4 former presidents, including George W. Bush, so Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and George W. Bush, came out and seeking unity and seeking to tone down the rhetoric.
Well, that's a wonderful thing.
But the governor of Utah has made some statements that are the same. Even in the House of Representatives, you have had moments of prayer, moments where there's a call to unity and lowering the rhetoric. So there are those voices. The problem is it's not coming from the top.
Those voices
well, that's true too, but not.
Navarro's response was direct. It is documented. It is on video. It requires no misrepresentation. And framing factual criticism of those statements as a precursor to violence is itself an attempt to use the assassination to eliminate legitimate accountability. The doxing and security threat discussion was real. Judges have been threatened, journalists harassed, public officials across the spectrum targeted. That is a genuine crisis predating this moment. But drawing a direct line from progressive criticism of Kirk's rhetoric to his assassination, without evidence, is the same logic used after January 6th to blame Democratic rhetoric for the insurrection. The line between political speech and political violence is critical. Erasing it serves a specific purpose. Trump's proposed RICO response deserves the scrutiny it barely received. Announcing federal investigations into left-wing organizations before any investigation established organizational responsibility is not law enforcement. It is a political move. RICO requires a pattern of organized criminal activity with specific evidentiary standards. The same administration that pardoned January 6th participants convicted of violence against police is now proposing RICO investigations against critics of Kirk's documented statements. The asymmetry requires no elaboration, only honesty. Dr. West closed with the framework this moment most needs and least has. He invoked King, not as nostalgia, but as a practical standard. King faced death threats, assassinations of colleagues, and state violence. His response was not to match the hatred, but to insist on something harder: character, love, justice, refusing to become the thing you are fighting. How a movement carries itself in its darkest moments is the only honest test of what it actually stands for. That standard is not comfortable. It is not immediately satisfying. It is the only one that builds something worth having on the other side of this.
Terrorism.
It isn't, because of one of the persons who exemplified this principle, and that was Charlie Kirk. Right? His whole shtick, his whole thing, his whole actual very, very important thing, similar to what we do here on this table every night, is go into a college campus with a sign that says, "Prove me wrong," and he would say, whoever disagrees with me the most, come to the front of the line. Right? That is encouraging people to disagree with him. I don't think, as a Republican Party, we should stifle people criticizing people with views like Charlie Kirk. That's the whole point of the fight. But when you're celebrating, look, I saw Newsday, a very popular newspaper here in the state of New York. They ran a cartoon with that very saying over the tent that Charlie Kirk was in. It was a cartoon, a political cartoon. And it just had an empty chair with blood spattered on the back of a tent. If that's not inappropriate, if that doesn't rise to the level of just disgustingness, you know, if my grandmother was alive, she would have canceled her Newsday subscription, but I suspect she probably canceled it a long time before.
But what you're saying, I mean, you're saying that nobody's doing that, but I mean, let's just play J.D. Vance. He's accusing a liberal magazine of being funded by Democratic billionaires, and you know, he's kind of threatening to take their funding away. Listen.
George Soros's Open Society Foundation funds this magazine, as does the Ford Foundation and many other wealthy titans of the American progressive movement. The writer accuses Charlie of saying, and I quote, "Black women do not have brain processing power to be taken seriously." Charlie was gunned down in broad daylight, and well-funded institutions of the left lied about what he said so as to justify his murder. This is soulless and evil.
What is he claiming? What is he claiming there was the lie?
Just as a point of clarification, the Nation says they don't get funding from George Soros, but the threat is that these news magazines, newspapers, or whatever, if they're funded by liberals that he doesn't like, they're going to find a way to target that because they don't like something that was written in that magazine about Charlie Kirk's past statements.
J.D. Vance is saying in this clip, if I understood correctly, that it is a lie to say that Charlie Kirk said that about black women?
He's saying, and I'll just tell you what he said he's saying. He's saying that Charlie Kirk was talking specifically about
the point. Because there's, you know, some folks out there trying to sanitize everything that Charlie Kirk said that might be offensive to others. The governor of Utah called some of the statements by Charlie Kirk inflammatory, and he's taking a lot of flack from his own party for doing that. And the point is, when I say people are missing the point is, look, let's acknowledge that Charlie Kirk wasn't out there spreading pixie dust and talking about unicorns, and that some of the things he said, to quote the governor of Utah, were inflammatory and worse. But the point is, he has the right to do that in the United States of America. And I have the right to disagree and find those statements objectionable.
I think that's it.
But by pretending that that's not what was said, we're not getting to the point that we are here talking about and defending freedom of speech.
But two things can be true at the same time. Charlie Kirk's assassination was wrong, full stop, no qualifications. And Charlie Kirk's statements about black women's cognitive capacity were offensive, harmful, and documented. Full stop, no qualifications. The pressure to choose between those two truths, to either celebrate the death or pretend the statements did not exist, is not a moral demand. It is a political one. And Ana Navarro refusing to comply with that demand is not disrespect for the dead. It is respect for the people his statements harmed while he was alive. The attempt to use this tragedy to silence political criticism through RICO designations, domestic terror labels, and the framing of factual accountability as incitement is itself a form of political violence. Not the physical kind, the institutional kind. The kind that uses the machinery of government to punish opposition and eliminate dissent by attaching it to the worst possible act and demanding that the connection be accepted without evidence. Dr. West's standard is the hardest and the most necessary. In a moment that pulls toward retribution on every side, the choice to insist on justice over revenge, character over tribalism, and truth over comfort is not weakness. It is the only thing that has ever built anything that lasted. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Do you think it is possible to simultaneously grieve a political figure's death and honestly critique their ideology? And what do you make of the administration's response, using the assassination to pursue RICO investigations against political opponents? Subscribe to the debate, Chaz. We will keep holding both truths for as long as it takes.